If you walk into a modern hospital today, you will find a highly advanced, sterile system designed to completely insulate us from the reality of our own mortality. We hide the dying behind thick white plastic curtains, hush our voices in quiet corridors, and spend massive fortunes on medical technology, lifestyle products, and longevity treatments, desperately trying to push the boundary of life just a few years further. To the modern mind, death is the ultimate defeat, a terrifying, chaotic biological failure that represents the absolute annihilation of the individual self. We treat this deep, chronic anxiety as a default human setting, a universal psychological tax that every human who has ever lived has had to pay. But if you could travel back 20,000 years, sit around a crackling campfire, and speak to our ancestors, you would find a mindset that feels completely foreign, almost shocking, to our modern sensibilities. Ancient humans did not live in a constant state of mortality panic. They faced a world of extreme physical danger, starvation, freezing winters, and giant predators. Yet they met the end of life with a profound, calm acceptance. Why didn't ancient humans fear death? To understand this, we first have to look at how the modern world has radically redefined the concept of the self, and how we have completely broken our ancient evolutionary programming. For 99% of human history, the concept of I was entirely secondary to the concept of we. Today, we live in a highly individualistic society where we are taught from childhood to view ourselves as completely independent islands. We build our own careers, secure our own private property, and view our individual consciousness as the center of our universe. Because our identity is so isolated, the physical end of our body feels like the total, catastrophic destruction of everything that matters. But in a prehistoric hunter-gatherer band of about 50 to 150 people, the individual was not an island. You were merely a single cell inside a giant, highly cooperative, permanent organism, the tribe. Your thoughts, your survival, and your daily life were completely integrated with your community. You slept huddled together for warmth, shared every bite of food, and faced every predator as a single, unified unit. Because your very identity was woven into the collective fabric of the tribe, your physical end did not feel like the end of the universe. The tribe would survive. Your children would be raised by your sisters and grandmothers. Your stories would be told around the campfire every night. Your knowledge, your jokes, and your skills would continue to walk the earth in the minds of your companions. The collective we lived on, and because you were a part of that collective, you never truly died. But this psychological shield was reinforced by a startling physical reality. Ancient humans did not isolate their dead. In our modern world, we treat the dead with a highly sanitized distance. We send bodies to funeral homes, bury them in quiet cemeteries miles away from our homes, and rarely, if ever, look at raw human bones. We have made death invisible. But when archaeologists excavate prehistoric caves and rock shelters, they don't find cemeteries on the outskirts of town. They find the dead buried directly inside the living spaces. Our ancestors buried their grandfathers, sisters, and children right inside the cave, sometimes directly under the soft clay floor where they laid their sleeping mats. This means that ancient humans lived, cooked, laughed, and slept literally on top of their grandparents' bones. The dead were not gone. They were still roommates. They were kept close, integrated into the physical space of the family. In many ancient cultures, after the flesh had decomposed, the living would dig up the bones, clean them, paint them with red ochre, the mineral pigment resembling fresh, oxygen-rich blood, and display them in the cave or carry them during migrations. To them, the ancestors were still active, whispering members of the community. They were just sleeping in a different room. Death was not a separation, it was simply a change of address within the home. This deep sense of continuity was further supported by their relationship with the natural world. To a modern human living in a sterile, concrete apartment, the world is a collection of dead, inanimate objects. We buy our meat wrapped in plastic, our water in bottles, and we are completely insulated from the natural cycles of decay and rebirth. But to an animistic hunter-gatherer, Everything in the universe was alive, and everything was connected in a continuous recycling loop of energy. They watched the autumn leaves fall and rot into rich black soil, only to see vibrant green sprouts emerge from that very rot in the spring. They saw the woolly mammoth die, the soil eat its flesh, the grass grow tall and sweet from that soil, and the next generation of mammoths eat the grass. They understood at a deep physical level that they were part of this loop. When you eat the deer becomes you. When you die, the soil eats you, the grass grows, and the deer eats the grass. It was a perfect, logical recycling of life force. Death was not a biological failure. It was the essential, generous act of returning your borrowed energy to the system so that new life could begin. To fear death was as illogical as a wave fearing the ocean. And then there is the biological reality of how our brains actually handle stress. Modern humans are cursed with a highly developed prefrontal cortex that allows us to project ourselves decades into the future. We can sit on a comfortable couch, completely safe, and torture ourselves with abstract, invisible worries about how we will die 30 years from now. This constant low-grade slow burn of mortality anxiety is an evolutionary glitch caused by a modern world with no immediate threats. But our ancestors' brains were designed for immediate physical survival tasks. When they experienced fear, it was acute, temporary, and highly practical, like running from a cave lion. Once the lion was gone, their stress response shut off completely. They didn't have the luxury or the cognitive space to sit around in a state of chronic, abstract worry about their eventual demise. They lived intensely in the present moment, which naturally crowded out the quiet, creeping terror of the future. Finally, we must look at how they treated the transition itself. To the ancient mind, death was not a sudden, terrifying cliff. It was treated as a rite of passage, no different from puberty, initiation, or marriage. When archaeologists excavated the 24,000-year-old burial site of Sungir in Russia, they found a man buried with thousands of meticulously carved ivory beads, polished mammoth tusk bracelets, and a polar fox hat. In Italy, the 10,000-year-old grave of the baby girl Neve was decorated with 70 perforated shell beads. In Shanidar Cave, Neanderthals laid their dead on beds of colorful wild bachelor buttons, hollyhocks, and grape hyacinths. These elaborate grave goods and flower offerings were not just displays of grief, they were a travel kit. They were preparing their loved ones for the next leg of their journey. Death was simply the final ceremony of life, a transition of social status from a living helper to a protected, venerated ancestor. We built a modern world of extreme convenience and physical safety, but we paid a massive psychological price for our protection. In locking our doors and sanitizing our lives, we cut ourselves off from the grand cooperative networks of the tribe and the beautiful, continuous loop of nature. We left our ancestors buried in the dark and chose to face the horizon completely alone. Our ancient hardware still remembers how to face the end with peace. The next time you find yourself overwhelmed by the quiet anxiety of your own mortality, look out at the trees, feel the wind, and remember that your body is not a fragile mistake. It is an ancient, self-tensioning system, temporarily holding a spark of energy that has been traveling through the universe for billions of years. And when the fire finally goes out, you aren't disappearing. You are simply returning home to the camp.